And I know they don't care. They've got government backing. But the point is, we've got to stand for the First Amendment, or no one is going to have free speech as this iron curtain of tyranny descends. Now, Lord Monckton will be with us 30 minutes in the next hour, joining us on video Skype. But I hadn't talked about this yet today, and I wanted to discuss it now. What's going on with this Professor Kari Norgaard. And I have just, had enough of this assistant professor of sociology and environmental studies, because it's not just her saying we're mentally ill or racist. It's all of them. And we have a big article on this at Infowars.com. The threat of green fascism is the title, where they say, arrest us, where they say, shut us down, ban our speech. White House regulations are. Cass Sunstein says, fine us, fee us, censor us, arrest us. This is pure authoritarianism. Okay? And now they've shut the video down and are saying that you cannot criticize a public figure. This is outrageous. She can call us racist. She can say we're mentally ill. And oh, well, she says so. She says so, so it's so. And then we can't do this. And now the university is saying she never said that, even though it's in her paper that she says we need to be treated, and that's a standard thing with them, that we're criminals or we're mentally ill. And I know Lord Monckton can chronicle their examples of this. He has been beat up. He has been thrown out by the UN. You try to talk to Al Gore, you get roughed up at UN events. These are dangerous people. The UN is in Uganda and also in Central America on record killing people. This is in the New York Times, to get their land for carbon sinks. We have Agenda 21 outside Austin. I'm going to get to it at the start of the next hour. Lord Monckton, that's a long preface intro. But, I tell you, they just think they're anointed, and they think their authoritarianism doesn't stink. What do you say, Lord Monckton, one of the leading experts heading up your center that researches these people? All of your research has been proven correct, so now they're calling for shutting us up.
I think that puts it very bluntly and very correctly, Alex. They are running scared. If I can just review what the climate has been doing over the last few years. We've just had, literally 2 days ago, figures from the Hadley Centre and the Climatic Research Unit at the University of East Anglia. These people have now admitted that there's been no statistically significant global warming for 15 years. Likewise, the most accurate sea level satellite that we have had up there for a few years is the Aviso Envisat satellite. That shows sea level over the last 8 years since that satellite first went up, rising at a rate of equivalent to 1.3 inches per century. The Florida State University's index of the activity of hurricanes, tropical cyclones and typhoons around the world, that shows the lowest level of hurricane activity in 30 years since the satellites were first watching. The sea ice extent just today is greater for this time of year than it has been at almost any time since the 1979, when again the satellites were first able to watch, and the spring has come a month late up there. It's very, very cold up there. That's why we've had it warm down here. So all their big storylines about how terrible it's all going to be are falling apart. Polar bears, another one, just today, an important report out showing that the population of polar bears continues to grow as it has since the 1940s. This is not the profile of a species in imminent threat of extinction.
Well, they're actually a scourge, as you know, invading green areas and attacking people and invading their homes.
Absolutely. They're now becoming very aggressive and intrusive because there are so many of them, and they can't get enough food in these very, very cold conditions, unusually cold conditions in the Arctic. So they increasingly invade the human settlements in Greenland and Canada. So these are the actual realities of the climate, and it is quite clear that what they predicted would happen isn't happening. And in fact, if we look back on this now, Alex, you and I have been at this for some time, but the UN's climate panel, the IPCC, produced its first report in 1990, and that, of course, is a generation ago. So shall we have a look at how their prediction of global temperature has got on? They gave a high-end, a medium-end, and a low-end prediction. And yes, there has been warming since 1990, but not very much. It's actually below even the low-end prediction of the IPCC. They've got every single forecast that they've ever done wrong. Every single one of these forecasts was exaggerated.
Plus the studies I've seen that you've covered, and you're listing real facts here. They'll just say peer-reviewed, but you have admitted facts. They're not denying it. A little bit of warming is actually good. Plus this gaggle of nuts said that we were going to be in an ice age by the 90s back in the 70s.
That's right. So what they want to do is they know they can get grants and attention and grow their little bureaucratic empires and academic empires by pretending there's a problem. It doesn't matter which direction the problem they pretend is, as long as they can all agree on telling the same story. Well, first of all, they tried to tell the story of global cooling, whereupon global warming began. Then the global warming stopped. And they can't change gear. They can't go back to global cooling or everybody will laugh at them. They can't pretend that global warming is happening because for 15 years, on their own figures, on the figures of the cheerleaders for this whole scare, it isn't happening. And so now they're increasingly forced back onto these rather desperate expedients, one of which, we'll come on to Norgaard in just a minute. I want to do one more before that. I came across this when I was addressing the Law Society of Ireland in Galway a few weeks ago. They produced a graph, you'll see it on the left-wing websites too, showing there have been many periods over the last 150 years since we kept global temperature records, when there's been 10 or 15 years without any global warming, like the last 10 or 15 years. Now, of course, what they don't realise when they show that that is the case is that the fact exercises a very great constraint on the rate at which warming is occurring or could occur. So yes, we are getting a little warming. You'd expect to see a little warming over the long term if you add lots of CO2 to the atmosphere. But the point is, it's not going to be very much. It's not going to be alarming. And even if it was, as I said to the California state legislature just a week ago, it's, in their case, it's about 30 times cheaper to sit back, go surfing and enjoy the sunshine and adapt to the adverse consequences of any warming than it is to follow policies like California's Bill AB 32 and build all those windmills in the Altamont Pass to kill all the golden eagles and hawks and kites that they're killing by the thousand every year. These are environmentally damaging projects, but the fact is it's vastly cheaper, even if the warming was going to be as bad as they say it is, to do nothing. And that brings me on to Professor Norgaard, and I'm sorry that I too have kind of come crabwise around the subject, because I wanted to put what she is saying into context. What you have just heard from me, Alex, is not something insane. I have merely cited data and fact after data after fact and graphs and charts and equations and figures, all of which you can verify, you can check, I'm not making them up. So why, in any rational world where free speech was allowed, would I not be allowed to tell the truth? And would I instead be accused of being some kind of a nutter? And this, after all, and let's be very blunt about this is what they used to do in Nazi Germany and in Stalin's Russia. If they didn't like your point of view, then what they did was they said, right, we're going to send you away to the Gulag to be re-educated, because you are suffering from a mental illness, the mental illness of not agreeing with the totalitarian dictatorial...
And let me just add, it's not just her. I mean, there are so many of them, when I went back and looked last night, who say re-educate, arrest, drug, that she's just going along with what is standard when she says, treat us. I mean, they're calling for an authoritarianism. Al Gore is saying they've got to force it on us now. He said that 2 weeks ago in Austin at South by Southwest.
I think this is it. They are terrified now that because the facts, the actual unfolding climate, is not happening as they and those whom they have been quoting said it would, they are now terrified. And so they're trying to do what is always done by the left in these circumstances, to shout down any opposition with threats of arrest and international climate courts. If you go back to the Durban Climate Conference just last December, the UN's conference there, the members of all the world's nations were there. The only person who revealed that in that major negotiating document was a proposal to establish an international climate court to which only Western people could be brought in front of, was me. The rest of the world's journalists were silent about it because they're beginning to become embarrassed.
And by the way, they had a police officer attack you for no reason on video, at the Copenhagen event.
That was very stupid of him because my back was turned to him at the time and I was walking away. So that was silly too. And he had lost his temper because he'd been listening to me talking with my mates. I wasn't even talking to him about the climate for 3 hours because so badly organized was it. We were left standing in this bitter sub-zero cold.
But he showed you how to, again, shut him up. How dare you have free speech? Bam!
So I was knocked to the ground, and he said, you're one of the nastiest people I've ever come across. And I said, I haven't even talked to you. I was talking very friendly way to my friends, but that's the way it is now. You see, these people, Alex, don't have religion. They don't believe in anything until now. Now they've got religion, or in fact, superstition, of course, a superstition being a religion that you can prove isn't true. And they've got superstition. They don't realize they've got religion.
No, it's their religion. That's why Al Gore's like, shut them up. I mean, they're now saying, shut people up.
The danger is they don't realize they've got it. See, you and I, Alex, we belong to the Christian faith. We know where we stand. But they don't have a rite of initiation that says, formerly you were not a global warming believer and now you are. So they don't realize that they've got religion. They actually think that they're being rational in demanding, as Norgaard is said to have done in that press release issued by her own University of Oregon, that not only society as a whole, but individuals should be treated because of their views on global warming. The word treated was there, I know, because I went and checked. I wrote to Professor Norgaard.
No, we have the copy, but I mean, they have TV ads for kids where they blow children up and kill them. Yeah, I mean, over in England, as you know, if you don't go along with it. This is all they ever talk about. It's part of a larger tapestry, but let's expand on this. They have not removed this. Kari Norgaard, assistant professor, and it goes on. She says, listen to your science advisor. She wrote this. Fortunately, you have made an excellent choice in commissioning Harvard physicist and Nobel Peace Prize recipient John Holdren as your science advisor. So here she is in a letter to Obama that's public. Of course, he's not a Peace Prize winner. He's not a Nobel Prize winner, period. Of course, he is for drugging the water supply to sterilize us. And she goes on to say, don't wait for public consensus on climate change. This is a public letter. And she goes, public opinion does matter in democracy, but this is a time when following it would be a serious mistake. So here she is calling for an end to freedom. We'll be back with Lord Christopher Monckton of scienceandpublicpolicy.org. I want to thank John Rappaport, who sits in for us sometimes, investigative journalist at nomorefakenews.com. He sent this to us, and Paul Watson's getting it out right now. This will be breaking, just like we broke it last week that she says, treat us. She tried to back off. Here she is doing work for another university, and we've saved it in case they take it down. And Paul Watson's got the article, Whitman College. Kari Norgaard, assistant professor of sociology and environmental studies. This is 3 years ago when Obama's first getting in. She says, listen to your science advisor. And she goes on to say, don't wait for public consensus on climate change. This is written by her. I have you now. And stop shutting my videos down. Public opinion does matter in democracy, but this is a time when following it would be a serious mistake. 2 factors make public understanding of climate change unusually complex. And she goes on to say, shut it down dictatorially. Shut down coal. She says right here. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, scroll down where she says shut down coal, shut down everything. Folks, that's what he's doing. Congress says no, he just does it. China gets 3 new ones a week, we get them shut down. We're going into a depression. Lord Monckton, this is breaking. I got this an hour ago. We vetted it. We checked. This is her. She did it. Unbelievable, sir. This is even bigger than saying treat us. What do you make of this latest outrage?
It is indeed an outrage. And I think, Alex, the fact that you have been taken off YouTube is also an outrage. And the fact that they've been taking me off YouTube slowly for many years by various devices. And it is quite clear that what we're dealing with now is a very rapid march towards the sort of totalitarianism that Hitler practiced in Germany, and that Stalin practiced in Russia, and that Mao practiced in China, and that Pol Pot practiced in Cambodia. What we're now getting, and Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam while I think of it, what we're now getting is the same things happening here. It's the same political forces, the people who think that they know best. Let's just examine that letter by Norgaard that you're referring to. The first thing is, does she have any more qualifications than you or I, Alex, to write and say that climate change is a uniquely dangerous thing that people are incapable of understanding for themselves? No, she is some kind of a sociologist, and by all accounts a very bad one.
And again, look at the arrogance. She says we must get rid of democracy and freedom because the public is stupid. No, I built my operation out of nothing. Lord Monckton has had big companies he built to himself. You live in a government reservation, and you're telling us we're idiots? You are the idiot.
That, I think, is fair comment, and I think also it's fair comment that if she has absolutely no knowledge of the science behind this, she might at least have tried to study it a bit before coming out with these pronouncements. You see, Alex, when I first began looking at this, I went and talked to the scientists on both sides. I wanted to hear what the science really said. I wanted to understand the economics for myself. I sweated the numbers for myself before I started shooting my mouth off on this. It took me 6 months before I said anything.
So did I. I spent years before I even ventured.
Know what this was about. Now, she clearly hasn't got the faintest clue. Imagine what letter she should now be writing. She should be writing saying, Dear President Obama, there are many problems you have to deal with, not the least of which is a massive and very rapidly growing public debt. So the first thing is the government shouldn't be spending money on climate change, given that there isn't any at the moment, and likewise, nor should the private sector be made to pay by not being allowed to buy cheap coal-fired electricity unless they're lucky enough to be able to buy it from China. This is what is so absurd about what's going on. These people are absolutely intent on closing down America in particular and the West in general. I do not recall, Alex, having heard that Professor Norgaard has written to the Chinese government saying that their declared policy, you'll find it in the annual statistical communiques of the People's Republic of China, issued in Peking every year, of building 2 or 3 new coal-fired power stations a month.
There's a 40-minute talk I did with Mark Moreno, congressional advisor on climate change, the guy that heads up climatedepot.com at Infowars.com, discussing the other videos that YouTube has taken down because I'm not allowed to criticize a woman who says, get rid of freedom, get rid of my votes, I don't count, I'm too stupid, I need to be treated. I mean, we've got more of her letters on her official site saying it. But they control reality. Now they've come out and said, she never said that. So I'm supposed to say, okay, I'll shut up. Because after all, you're this almighty person. And I've been around these so-called academics that call themselves on the left. They are so arrogant. And I'm not even into the whole left-right paradigm. There's problems on the so-called right. But there's something about the left where they always talk about, I hear them on talk radio, about how stupid everyone is and how smart they are. And it's amazing that they live off of the tax money I pay, no government handouts here, and then sit around all day and talk about how I'm mentally ill, I'm racist, and I need to have my rights taken away because democracy is bad, in her words, and that I need to do what she says. This person, I mean, and then I'm not even allowed to criticize her. I know I'm ranting, Lord Monckton, I'm sorry. I'm just very angry about them shutting my videos down. It is a serious violation. This is 21st century book burning.
First of all, you are right, and I think that's a great phrase, 21st century book burning. That is exactly what it is. These are people who have lost and lost and lost the argument. Every single point they said would come to pass, it's gone the other way. Every single piece of analysis they've done is full of more holes than a piece of Gruyere cheese. They don't know what they're talking about, and now they've realized it, and so their way of covering up for their own ineptitude, incompetence, and plain malice against the West in trying to shut it down in the name of this bogus scare is to silence all criticism. And of course Google, and who sits on the board? Al Gore, of course. Google owns Yahoo.com. Yahoo is now, not Yahoo, I'm talking about YouTube, I'm sorry. YouTube is now is shutting down videos like yours, many videos like mine.
No, I've seen yours shut down, and they'll use all sorts of little excuses.
They will. They just absolutely hate the idea of freedom of expression. They hate to admit that the left, having decided this was going to be its defining issue, this was going to be the issue that at last allowed them to shut the West down, they've now realized it's gone wrong far more quickly than even they had suspected it would. They are acutely embarrassed because they know, Alex, and I think I may have said this to you before, I'm going to say it again, this could be the end of the left. They know this. They bet the farm on this global warming scare. They put all their resources, I mean literally tens of millions a year, into propaganda. If you just look at the biggest...
Yeah, what's the total number? It's like 100 billion globally or something they've spent on this?
Well, I mean, if you just take the 10 biggest environmental organizations in the US, they spent between them $2 billion last year, most of it on climate propaganda as an excuse for trying to shut the West down. That's the kind of money they are spraying around. And of course, there's a lot of genuine environmentalists, some of them may be listening to this, some of them who really do care about the environment, who realize there are real environmental problems. Deforestation, overfishing of the world's oceans are a really pressing problem. Many species will have gone in 20 years if we don't do something about that. And these are things that could be and should be solved by international cooperation in a sensible way. But this climate scare is diverting attention away from the real environmental problems. It's the left-wing wet dream. They had thought they could get away with what they couldn't do with all the guns and goose-stepping troops, first of Hitler and then of Stalin and Mao. They thought they could shut the West down from within. All
right, Lord Monckton, stay there. Long segment coming up. I want to get in to finishing up your story about China's power plants. You got cut off before the last break. I want to talk about real environmental threats, because I agree with you. The overfishing, that's a real thing. Toxic waste dumping. Stay there. We'll be right back on the other side. If I sound breathless, it's because I am. 16, 17 years ago when I first got on air, I began to research Agenda 21, UN biospheres. In fact, guys, for PrisonPlanet.tv viewers, put the congressional map of Agenda 21 zones up, please. That's the Dr. Michael Kaufman congressional map. It shows half the U.S. off limits in these environmental corridors, like something out of feudalism. And the UN even says in Biological Diversity Assessment in '96, they want to go back to feudalism. And we've got all these professors and academics saying rationing, authoritarianism. They say fascism isn't bad when it's green fascism. Now, that's a Senate vote map, 21, where they want to not let you travel now if you haven't paid all your income taxes. It's the Dr. Michael Kaufman UN map. And that will bring it up, what we showed in the first hour. Now, Lord Christopher Monckton, who heads up, well, there's no doubt, globally, the premier aggregator of the scientific data proving what's really happening with our planet, with the real scientists, the real satellites. He's the guy, 9 times out of 10, that is forecasting and exposing these people way out ahead. So they've called for his arrest, you name it. And he joins us now. But expanding on that, they have expunged all the universities she's spoken at or that she's worked at, except for Whitman College 3.5 years ago when she was commending Obama for appointing John P. Holdren, who's also called for a global tyranny and drugging the water to sterilize us and praising authoritarianism like Dr. Pianka does at UT. I mean, this is who they are. It's not like this is some oddball we found. We have it. We have it. The university pulled what she'd written about treating us for mental illness and said that it was a mistake. And now we find this. Don't wait for public consensus. A public letter She says, public opinion does matter in democracy, but this is a time when following it would be a serious mistake. Two factors make public understanding of climate change unusually complex. She goes on to say we're stupid, and then it says eliminate coal, all of this stuff. She says we can't do what the public wants. This is even 3.5 years ago. They knew they were losing momentum and failing because of their power grab. Lord Monckton, what do you make of this? This is a huge discovery that the little poster girl that they're defending, it turns out, is an open authoritarian.
That's no surprise, because so many, particularly in sociology, which is a non-subject, which I would personally ban from all universities, if I were an authoritarian, that is, these people think that they know better than we do. This is the essence of totalitarianism. They say they are so much sure that they know better than us, that they want to tell us every little detail of our lives. No, you can't burn coal in the grate or in a power station. No, you can't light a candle, it gives off carbon dioxide. No, you can't even go back to being a caveman, because that means lighting a fire in your cave, and that emits carbon dioxide. What you've got to do is just die and stop breathing, because breathing emits carbon dioxide as well. It's this childish, persistent, stupid, intellectually vapid arrogance which is the hallmark of the totalitarian everywhere. And if you call them totalitarians or fascists or communists or international socialists or whatever phrase also means totalitarianism, oh, how they blub. I once let slip in Australia that a remark by somebody over there was a fascist opinion. I didn't even call the guy a fascist, I just said he'd expressed a fascist opinion. And oh my goodness, how the left wailed and howled when I arrived in Australia for a speaking tour last year. The West Australian in Perth, where I landed, on the front page said, "Ban the Lord." That's their instinctive reaction. Every time you use their kind of language back, they want to ban us from saying it, but they want to continue to have the freedom to use this language themselves. So there's a poisonous double standard there. And this Professor Norgaard, the fact is that if she had wanted to deal with what happened in a professional way, let us suppose that her original paper, as she now claims, didn't contain anything about the treatment of individuals who had this mental disease of not believing that global warming is a global crisis. Let's suppose that she was true in that. I'm not going to argue that for the moment at this point. The fact is that her university, in a press release which I read while it was still up on the web, said that she, in her paper, it was their press release describing what she had done, they had cleared it with her before it was put up there, said very clearly that this must be recognised and treated in individuals as well as in societies as a whole. That's what it said. And then when I spotted that, I wrote to her a very polite letter, and I said, look, Professor, I don't know whether you said this or not, but the university is saying that you did, or at least it is accused of saying that you did, because I hadn't yet seen the university press release then. I looked at it again afterwards. I said, if that is what they're saying, could you please get it changed? Because this does give a very bad impression, and it's taking us back to the era of Hitler and Stalin. It was a very polite letter, and I added for good measure a few points about why global warming really wasn't a global crisis after all. And the thing is, I got no reply. What she should have done is to write back and say, thank you for writing in such a civilized fashion to point out what appeared on the press release. I hadn't noticed this. I've asked the university to change it, and they're going to put up a new version. And that would have quietened the whole matter down in a perfectly straightforward way. But no, the left can never admit they ever got anything wrong. So she didn't do that. Instead, furtively, the university, without, it hoped, leaving any trace, took out the words "and treated" in the press release that was up, the University of Oregon, and that those words no longer appear.
But Lord Monckton, let me stop you here, because
I must finish this, because there is a Google cache of the earlier version of the page, and that proves that the words were there. The university didn't realize that in doing this furtively, it was going to make itself look just like another third world dictatorship. And what these people have got to learn is they've got to learn that, in fact, in civilized open debate, there has to be a kind of modicum of honesty, which these people have long since abandoned. And that's why nobody listens to them anymore.
Well, that was my point, though, is that you're being very kind here, saying, you know, perhaps, but look, they've expunged all her writings. The one writing we find on a university written by her, a letter to the president, officially her site, says we need to get rid of people's rights on this and do whatever we want. And we know this drug, treat, re-educate is constantly parroted by the entire gaggle. So she spews a talking point that we've seen ad nauseum by other control freaks, other greeny, you know, authoritarians. And then we find another thing they haven't memory hold yet, and it says the same stuff. So I mean, obviously she said it.
I think the point is that the way I like to approach these people is to be very polite to them privately and say, look, something's gone wrong here, maybe you'd like to put it right. Then if they're sensible, they write back and they say, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, of course I didn't mean that, and change it. But she didn't write back to me, and that tells me all I need to know about what her true intentions were. Because I didn't write a nasty email. It was entirely friendly, civilized, sensible. I'll send you a copy of it after this, Alex, and you can put it up on your website. Because it makes very sensible points, not only about her, but also the main points about why we don't have a problem with the climate, and even if we did, there's nothing we can afford to do about it. It's much better not to worry about it, just let it happen. It won't be that damaging, with sea level rising at 1.3 inches per century, etc. So I think what we have to do is to say very firmly to these people, we are now on your case. If you come out and demand international climate courts or European criminal climate courts, they're actually talking about that in Europe at the moment. Of course, I'm trying to stop that too. If you go on talking about having people sent to psychiatric institutions and treated for mental illness, if they dare to raise perfectly legitimate scientific and economic questions rooted in the science, then it is you who deserve to be locked up and not them. And I'm going to make a proposal here, Alex. I think we're going to need a law which says that anybody who uses that kind of hate speech about having people treated for mental illness, if they dare to disagree with the official so-called consensus, which of course is just the Communist Party line, then I think anyone who says that should themselves be locked up in prison for hate speech, for discrimination against those who wish to exercise the right of free speech.
Yes, sir. Well, Lord Monckton, because that's not a violation of their speech, because they're calling for sedition against our liberties and our freedom, a revolutionary overthrow of the Magna Carta, of all common sense, of everything that has been the hallmark of free societies. When they're saying arrest people for their speech, that is the authoritarianism. They're saying shut us up for our scientific discussion, and we see this in every authoritarian system. Absolutely. I mean, what they're calling for is a criminal takeover, is an end of, quote, democracy in her words. I mean, that is a declaration of war against all free society.
Let me tell you the story of Trofim Denisovich Lysenko. Now, he, in the 1940s and 50s, he was a peasant. He was somebody who thought he knew about how to improve the yield of crops, and his idea was you soak the seed corn in water over the winter instead of planting it out in the autumn to get used to the cold weather, and then it germinates better in the spring. It doesn't, actually, but that was his theory, and he told his local Communist Party secretary of this over a beer one night, and the Communist Party secretary said, Trofim, here you are, an ignorant, untutored peasant, but you have come up with an idea as brilliant as this just because you live in the glorious Soviet Union. And by this propaganda, he ended up, by some ghastly mischance, as head of the Soviet Academy of Sciences, as a result of which there were 20 failed harvests, because they all had to pursue this ludicrous policy of soaking the seed corn in water, where in fact it just becomes rotten and doesn't produce any crop. And 20 failed harvests, 20 million Soviet citizens killed of starvation as a direct result of this mad policy imposed from the center. And anybody who quarreled with Lysenko and said this was wrong, anybody who also opposed his notion there was no such thing as genetics, was sent to prison or killed or both. That was what actually happened in Soviet Russia. And now the same kind of people are using the same kind of language and advocating the same kind of remedies, and it is they, not we, who should go to jail.
Well, I hear you, because, again, people say, well, you're just doing what they're doing. No, they're striking first. We're not saying arrest people for their political speech. We're saying arrest people who say arrest us, because it's that they are calling for the force of the state to be used on our liberties. They are the tyrants. And you know what they say in Latin about tyrants?
Well, absolutely. And as the dictator of Nicaragua used to say to those whom he defeated in the various elections there, you won the election, but I won the count. They like to stack the way things fall in their favor because they know that they can't beat us in argument. If you read Obama's hero, Saul Alinsky, another communist agitator just like Obama himself, Alinsky, in his Rules for Radicals, he says this. He says, don't try to argue with the capitalists. They are right. We all know they're right. We know they have the truth. We know they can argue better than we can because they're right and true. So if you want to deal with them, attack their reputations. And this is what she's doing. She's trying to make out that anyone who dares to say that there may be something wrong with this bogus climate science, that it's been oversold and over-exaggerated, and if there's no economic basis for it anyway, anyone who says that, she says, is effectively mentally defective.
Now, Lord Monckton, we've only got a few minutes left. You've been very gracious to join us on short notice, but I want to release the hounds of liberty here, cry havoc and release them. She had literally hundreds of pages at 3 different universities that were expunged, but they will be in the Google cache and the Wayback Machine. I have a limited crew. You have a limited crew. It is now time for all of us to crawl through the caches of what she said, because they expunged it all in a desperate stratagem to hide this, because the one document we found that they forgot to get, she's calling for authoritarianism. Okay, of course, she'll say this isn't her either in this letter to Obama. So, again, I believe they're afraid of this issue. They know that it's hit the zeitgeist, whereas thousands of other academics saying similar things, literally dozens at UT, I know personally, 2 miles away calling for it, calling for Chinese-style authoritarianism, forced abortion. I mean, this is what's pushed by these eugenicists. Lord Monckton, I wanted to look at the big picture here and talk about Agenda 21. The environmentalists, who aren't real environmentalists, as you said, they're distracting from all the real stuff that's happening that needs to be dealt with. They are establishing Agenda 21, a global UNESCO model of the ultra-elite against the rest of the free market, a neo-feudalism, a post-industrial world. They've taken over 30,000 acres, that's conservative, in Austin in the last 20 years, saying, forcing people to sell it for pennies on the dollar, farms and ranches in key development zones. I've interviewed the farmers and ranchers. They take this, one of the fastest growing cities in the U.S., they take this land, and a few years later take the restrictions off, and they, the commissars, the former mayors and others, sell it and control it and make money off of it. Open criminal activity. And they told the citizens, when we take this land, it's going to be giant green belts. But most of the land they didn't turn into green belts. They built shopping malls on it, movie theaters, whatever. The point is they stole it. Now, here's the Austin American Statesman. Residents troubled by surveillance cameras. On these tens of thousands of acres they haven't sold yet, because they don't want humans using it because they'll think it's their park, they put up big fences. Show folks a shot of this crew. They put up big game fences where the backyards back up and arrest people with hidden cameras that are seen ever walking on the land that was promised to be greenbelt. And it says in the article, worst of all, they even hike on the trail. The evil humans are hiking on the trail, and they have hidden cameras watching the evil citizens. I mean, this is pure feudalism, Lord Monckton. Your comments on that?
Well, that's exactly what it is. It is an outrage, and I think it's time that instead of just complaining about this, we started to make plans to fight back. The first step, it seems to me, is to get the matter of President Obama's birth certificate into court with a serious challenge rather than the joke challenges we've had so far. The next thing to do is to make sure that the Republicans, who seem to me to be dead from the neck up and dead from the neck down, every time this kind of outrage from the left comes out, they should say something about it. Why is it left always to you and me and Mark Morano and a tiny handful of others to speak out and say that this kind of hate speech from Professor Norgaard's university is the kind of thing that ought to be a criminal offense? If they try to make hate speech as they define it from us a criminal offence, then it's time that they should endure the same thing. If they go around accusing people like you and me, Alex, of being mentally defective because we dare to question the notions of global warming that they present, then they should go to jail for that, because that is an unreasonable restriction on our right to our reputation. And we have in England a law called criminal libel. You do that to me in England, I'll have you in court for it for criminal libel. And you can go to jail for a long time for doing it. Now, in the United States, you have no such law. And I think that free speech, which is guaranteed in your Constitution, can only work if universities like that of Oregon are told that if you use hate speech of that kind, you can be fined millions of dollars, and the people at the university responsible for it can go to jail for a very, very long time. Let us start using against the left precisely the weapons they're trying to use against us and see how they like it.
Well, Lord Monckton, don't we start with not even calling them the left? Because, I mean, Thomas Jefferson was on the left. You want, the old classic liberal. I mean, I can say you would be a classic leftist in that you wanted more freedom, more liberty. I want to show some photos. You can't see them, Lord Monckton, but later you can see the video. This is for your request for video stills from the hidden cameras lining the preserve, aiming at people's back kitchen window at night with them inside it eating. So this is what, with our tax money, they take tens of thousands of acres, don't want you on it because they want you to forget it's theirs so they can sell it later to their friends. I mean, it is just so blasphemous what they do.
And the reason why they want to keep you off it is that there is a very ancient right which goes back to Roman law and came to your law through English law. It's known as usufruct, or right of use, and that if the public passes freely over what would otherwise be private land without any restriction or fence or anyone saying you mustn't do it for 10 or 12 years,
it conveys.
The public then gains a right of way, which makes a mess of their plans later to sell it on to developers. That's why they're putting those fences up. That's why they don't want you walking through the land. It's not that you're going to tread on the voles or hurt the flowers. No, no, no. It's because they don't want you establishing a right of way so that they can't then sell the land.
Yes, sir. Exactly. It was supposed to be a commons. I remember in the law. It was supposed to, it's all over the country and all over the world with these UN land grabs. It was supposed to be, they said, oh, a commons park. And they immediately fence it and don't let you use it and then later sell it. I mean, it's so evil. How do you stop them?
They fence it. It's because they don't want rights of way established, because if a right of way goes across there, it vastly reduces the sale value to developers. That's why they're doing this. It's entirely for basically criminal reasons. And the trouble is now that because the state has become so wealthy and the individual so comparatively poor through having to pay excessive taxation and comply with excessive regulation, fewer and fewer individuals have the kind of wealth that is needed to take these people to the courts and get justice. And so I am also looking at proposals now to set up, effectively using their language, a people's court which can call to account any official paid by taxpayers for their behavior, and the people will be entitled to free representation at the expense of the public authority against whom they are bringing the charge, just so as to level the playing field and allow us to get our points.
Yes, sir. We're out of time, Lord Monckton. Just briefly, what do you think of her reportedly saying it's racist? I mean, the UN Agenda 21, that's pure racism.
Of course it is. All of it's racist. All of it is designed to try to shut down the West, and it is disfiguring to see so many people like her calling us names like racist when it is she who is the racist. She is saying there are two races, the clever ones like her and the mentally defective like us. That is exactly racism, and she should go to jail.
Well said, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. Scienceandpublicpolicy.org. Thank you, Lord Monckton.